Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with additional Week 10 college football predictions. This is the best of the rest. And for our first game, a game that going into the season, it was anticipated to be one of the biggest games of the entire season. In fact, there were some discussions on could this be a 1 versus 2 matchup? Clearly no longer the case. Penn State and number 1 Ohio State. Penn State has moved on from James Franklin. They're on a 4-game losing streak, while Ohio State, number 1 team in the country, defending national champions. When I first saw that Ohio State was favored by the amount that they are, favored by 20.5, so 3 touchdowns essentially, I looked more into the history of this matchup. And I was very intrigued to discover that of the 39 matchups between these two teams, only 8 have been decided by more than 20 points. I said it on Monday, and I'll say it a lot throughout the next 5 weeks as I said on Monday, but this is college football in November where chaos is inevitable. Because every team in November has an agenda. You just have to ask yourself, what is a particular team's agenda? Penn State's agenda, finish the season strong and essentially try to hinder teams' playoff chances. Or at least cause a disruption in their playoff chances. And looking at the history between these two teams, I was really tempted to pick the points with Penn State. Because I feel like if you ask 100 different content creators for college football, they're all going to say Ohio State should win by at least 3 touchdowns. I am someone that likes to take a lot of chances on this channel in November. If Drew Aller wasn't out for the season and this was the spread, I would definitely take the points with Penn State, but that is not the case. Plus, Ohio State leads the FBS in scoring defense and in total defense. They're giving up less than 6 points per game and giving up less than 217 yards a game. I am going to take Ohio State to cover the 20.5 and win by at least 3 touchdowns. As much as I'm willing to be different, I think that this is not a realistic time to be different. South Carolina and number 7 Ole Miss, both teams with emotional weeks last week, but for opposite reasons. South Carolina, emotional loss at home against Alabama, a game that I felt was very winnable for South Carolina as the game went on, but they got in their own way. Ole Miss, an emotional win on the road against Oklahoma, where they flipped the script from a week prior by scoring the final 9 points in the game. All while Lane Kiffin has been in major discussions about being the next head coach for Florida, and now that LSU has parted ways with Brian Kelly, Lane Kiffin is also being centered around those conversations as well. Could that be a potential distraction for Ole Miss in this month of November, as they have a fairly favorable path to the playoff? But once again, this is college football in November where chaos is inevitable. Meanwhile, South Carolina, they are just looking for a signature moment at the end of this season, as it's been a disappointing year for them. If I recall correctly, they started the season 13th in the rankings. Lenora Sellers, he was a Heisman candidate, a candidate to be a high pick in April's NFL draft. And this has been a disappointing season for South Carolina. A major reason for that is their lack of offensive line. They've allowed 28 sacks this season, tied for the second most in the FBS. South Carolina defensively, however, they are doing pretty solid. They're 39th in total defense, allowing 335.1 yards a game. Ole Miss is 10th in total offense, averaging 484.2 yards a game. Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss, who started as the backup but has taken over ever since the fourth quarter in week 2 against Kentucky, 1,864 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I'm anticipating there will be a few ranked teams this week that do not end up covering. I was tempted to take the points with Penn State. I'm tempted to take the points here with South Carolina. As out of the ordinary as it sounds, I am going to go with South Carolina to cover in this game. I think that Ole Miss is off of the emotional victory on the road, while South Carolina, they realized that they were there last week and they definitely feel very bitter about it. And I think they bounce back and make this a competitive game. I think Ole Miss only wins by 10 points. Up next, we have number 8 Georgia Tech and NC State. Georgia Tech, one of the teams this season that has flown under the radar. After Georgia Tech upset Clemson, there was discussions on, is it possible Georgia Tech could be 11-0 going into the Georgia game on the final weekend of the regular season? Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King, I personally think he does not get as much recognition as he deserves. I think as of right now, he should be in the top 4, maybe even top 3 as far as Heisman recognition. I unfortunately don't see many people talking about him. I don't know if it's because a lot of people, they don't view it as good numbers because he's not in one of the portrayed superior conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten. He's in the ACC. It's not a good conference, is what a lot of people would say. But throughout the season, I have expressed a lot of credit towards the ACC and the Big 12. The ACC is completely chaotic. And again, chaos is inevitable in November in college football. Georgia Tech is 15th in total offense. NC State, they're 43rd in total offense. And I am a little surprised to see that Georgia Tech's only favored by 5.5, but at the same time, I'm not. Because I do think that this is a trap game for Georgia Tech. Defensively, Georgia Tech is 74th in total defense. NC State 105th in total defense. NC State, they had a solid start to the season. They have a win against Virginia in a high-scoring game. Virginia is currently ranked 15th. But NC State's season has gone downhill fast. They've lost 4 of their last 5. And NC State, they are in a position to really sabotage Georgia Tech's season. It's going to be a national championship-like game for NC State. Despite Georgia Tech being ranked in the top 10, despite NC State losing 4 of their last 5 games, there's been a lot of ACC games this season that have been very close. And I think this is another one of those games. I think that Georgia Tech wins the game outright, but I think NC State, they make it a 3-point game. This feels like the type of game to me where Georgia Tech will have to survive and advance, and they do, winning by 3 points. Number 15, Virginia and Cal. Virginia, in these last 2 weeks, survive and advance against Washington State at home and North Carolina on the road in overtime. This week, they go on the road against a Cal team that I think is underrated, but at the same time, a little inconsistent. They're 5-3 on the season. Like Virginia, they also had to survive and advance against North Carolina a couple of weeks ago. They looked like a potential sleeper team in the ACC after the first 3 weeks of the season, but then they were shut out against San Diego State. They barely got past a Boston College team that is not having a good season. Last week, they lost to Virginia Tech on the road in double overtime. Virginia is 30th in total offense, and they're 8th in third down defense. Opponents are only converting on third down against the Cavaliers 29% of the time. I really want to take Cal to pull off the upset. However, yes, I do think this is a trap game for Virginia because it's November. Every road game is a trap game no matter who you are. No question, it's the furthest Virginia has traveled on the road this season, going coast to coast. But there has been a lot of resilience with this Virginia team. 3 of their last 4 games have gone to overtime. They've won all of those games, including Florida State in double overtime. I'm going to go with Virginia to win and win by more than 5 points. This feels like the kind of game that if Virginia finds themselves into trouble, they will be able to find a way to win as they have in these last 4 games. I have Virginia winning by a touchdown. And for the final game of the best of the rest for this week, number 5, Georgia and Florida. Florida recently parted ways with head coach Billy Napier. This is a rivalry game, and in rivalry games, you can discard all stats, rankings, records. However, this is a rivalry that has been nearly one-sided as of late. Under Kirby Smart, Georgia is 7-2 against Florida. I will, however, acknowledge that Florida, they have played well defensively throughout most of the season. They're only giving up an average of 20 points a game, which is in the top 35 in the FBS. However, Georgia is 9th in time of possession. And with Georgia being favored by 7.5 points, I, of course, decided to look more into the history of this matchup, the recent history. And in Georgia's 6 of their last 7 wins against Florida, they've won by more than 7. And with that being said, I am going to go with Georgia to win by more than 7. I have the recent history on my side, even though some may say that with this new era of college football, history may not mean everything. But with Florida parting ways with Billy Napier, having an interim coach with his first game being against Georgia, a Georgia team that is in national championship contention. And the last time we saw Georgia, they were down by 9 against Ole Miss at home, and they completely flipped the script, but that still wasn't good enough for Kirby Smart's standards. And more often than not, after Georgia plays a game that was not up to their standards, they have a tendency to dominate, and that's what I think happens here. And that will do it for my best of the rest for this week. If there was a game that was not in the best of the rest today or in the main 7 on Monday, please leave in the comment section. I will give you a response. My takeaways from college football and the NFL this past week should be on YouTube Shorts by the end of the day. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support today and throughout the entire season. Enjoy the games this weekend. Until next time, Vegas is always watching.